Met Office says carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing at rates so fast there is almost no chance of keeping global warming on target. It's down to record high emissions from fossil fuels burning and natural sinks, such as tropical forests, capturing less carbon. So how concerning is it? Well, I'm Charlene White, and this is what you need to know. Welcome to the podcast, where I'm joined by our science correspondent, Martin Stew. So, Martin, can you tell us more about these findings?
Yeah, so what they looked at, the Met Office, is a station on Hawaii, the middle of nowhere, looking at carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. They put it there because it's as far away from other pollution as possible. And what they've discovered is that we now have 424 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means nothing to you or me. But it's a worrying number. And the best thing I've seen to help explain this is a graph taken from polar science. So with polar science, if you drill into old ice, you're basically drilling back into the past. The deeper you drill, the further back you go. And what they've been able to do is look at the gas bubbles inside frozen ice back to 800,000 years ago.
Wow.
And what you can see is there are natural fluctuations in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It goes up and it goes down, as do temperatures, and it looks like the two things are very closely correlated. But then you zoom in to the kind of this end of the scale of the graph, and you see that after the Industrial Revolution, the graph shoots straight up with the carbon dioxide. So we are now at levels 50% higher than we've seen at any time before the Industrial Revolution. So it is increasing, and it is still going up. And in fact, last year, it rose at the fastest rate we've ever seen. Why is it happening? Well, it's sort of twofold. It's all to do with the balance of what we put out and what gets absorbed back in. So if we start with what's being put out, first and foremost, it's what we're burning, coal, gas, oil, things like that. And despite all the advances we've seen with wind and solar, electric cars, it feels like lots of good things happening. Last year, we burnt more fossil fuels than we've burnt in any year in history. And it's still going up. So it's getting worse. Add into that the fact that last year was particularly bad for wildfires. Now, we've obviously recently seen the wildfire in LA, which is devastating, but geographically quite small. Last year in Bolivia, for example, they had fires which spread an area twice the size of Scotland.
Goodness.
In forested area.
Okay.
So that's damaging those things. And also, when you have the fires, it puts more CO2 into the atmosphere. So that's what's going into the atmosphere. That's the problem. Now, normally, about 50% of emissions are absorbed back into the planet. How does that happen? Well, the biggest, what's called carbon sink, is the ocean. Takes about a third, between a quarter and a third of carbon, soaks it back up. The next biggest one is the soil, things like peat bogs, you might have heard, that absorbs as well. And then you've got forests, of course. Let's take them one at a time. So, last year was an El Nino year. That meant that the ocean surface was a bit warmer than usual. Now, have you ever had a soft drink, fizzy drink, can of Coke, something like that, in warm weather? If you've got a cold drink, it stays fizzier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a warm drink,
it goes flat.
It's flatter. Yeah. And the reason is cold liquid can hold more gas. And the ocean's exactly the same. Carbon dioxide is a gas. So when the ocean is colder, it can store and trap and hold more carbon dioxide. As it warms up, it's not able to hold as much. So first thing, the biggest thing, that's not holding quite as much carbon dioxide. Then you look at the soil. We've seen drought in quite a lot of areas, and we know that the drier soil is, the less carbon can be absorbed. And then we look at forests. I've just told you about the fires in Bolivia. We've also seen deforestation in other areas. So all these things are meaning that the natural sinks are absorbing less. So we're putting more in and we're absorbing less, and that balance is out of kilter, really.
So should we be worried then? Because 2024, last year, was the warmest on record. So how worried should we be about all of this?
Well, I'm not here to be alarmist, but a lot of climate scientists would say we certainly should be concerned. Last year we breached the magic 1.5 degree target. So the background is 10 years ago in Paris, the climate conference, world leaders sat around, they said, we will fight to try and keep global warming below 1.5 degrees above where it was before the Industrial Revolution started. Now, that is got to be an average over a long period of time. Last year, for 1 year alone, we broke it. So that's bad that we're beyond that. It doesn't count as breaching the contract because it's a short one-term year thing.
Yeah.
But it's heading in the wrong direction. And if we want to arrest the change we're seeing in the climate, we really need to be getting that balance equal, and it's going the wrong way. And why we should be worried about that, climate scientists say, is because for every fraction of a degree the climate goes up, or the temperatures go up, the chances of extreme weather increases. So the chance that you see droughts, the chance you see floods, the chance you see wildfires, which are devastating, and then make things worse again, they all increase. So that is why people are particularly worried about the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Well, let's have a look at these figures, because the Met Office predicts carbon dioxide rises between 2024 and 2025 will be less extreme than the previous 12 months. So surely that's a bit of positive news.
It is. Anything is a positive. Part of the reason for that is that we are moving from El Nino into La Nina. They're two different weather systems that naturally occur. And it tends to be in La Nina years, it's slightly cooler globally. And so what they think, in those slightly cooler conditions, the planet should be able to absorb more of the carbon. And so the upshot is, hopefully, we'll see rates rise at a slower level. But obviously, we don't want them to rise at all.
No.
And so what the people are saying is, whilst that rise is happening, we are not going to be hitting the targets. So yes, it's a good thing that the rise will be less than it has been last year.
Yeah.
But it is still not good news.
And finally, this year, 2025, is a key year for the Paris Agreement, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So, as I mentioned, Paris is 2015. This is 10 years on. Every year you have these COP conferences where the world leaders get around and they do a lot of talking and they try and get things agreed. 2 years ago, we had Dubai, where people agreed for the first time to say we need to transition away from fossil fuels. Last year, in Baku in Azerbaijan, they were trying to get finance sorted, essentially how wealthier nations can pay to help poorer nations mitigate and cope with climate change, and also do the things that might help, putting in more solar panels, that sort of thing. But the big one is Brazil at the end of this year. And what that is to do is to say, right, so we agreed 10 years ago in Paris that we're going to try and do it. This year, every country will have to basically make its plan, rubber stamp it, this is what we're doing, and sign up to those changes. So it's huge. Can they get these things across the line? Can they get consensus? Will they be enough? Will there be greenwashing? All these various things. And there's so much politics at play.
Yeah.
You've got Donald Trump waiting in the wings. You've got climate skepticism. You've got other things. There's so much at play. But we can see, just looking at the science and these graphs that go back 800,000 years, something is changing. And it is changing in the wrong direction. So some action needs to be taken. So yeah, this year is a really pivotal year.
All right. Well, Martin, thank you so much for talking us through that. Well, you can find more about this story on our website and on ITVX, but do continue to listen to our latest quick briefings to find out what you need to know about a whole range of headline topics. But until then, thanks very much for listening.